Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual training session. My name is Mike. I'm a project coordinator here with Africa Fire Mission. We're so happy you guys took time out of your schedules to come and join us for today's training. Today, we're joined by Jason Braun. He's going to be talking about incident command systems. And Jason's done some training for us in the past and has traveled with us. So we're glad to have him back joining us here today. Before we get started, just a couple administrative things. If you stick around for at least 70% of today's training, which is usually about 40 or 45 minutes, you will get a certificate of attendance for today's training. The name that goes on that certificate of attendance is the name for your Zoom screen there. So if you want to adjust that to whatever you'd like your certificate to read, please take care of that. After we get finished here, we'll have tea time, hosted by Jose, who is Africa Fire Mission's fire safety advocate. And speaking of Jose, at this time, I'm going to pass things over to Jose, and he's going to share a few words of encouragement with you all.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining in. Hi, Chief Mike. I'm actually in my home, at home. I've just started my leave, so I'm not in the office. And today, I just needed us to somewhat of encouragement is basically the point at which you need to rejuvenate. Yeah. And yes, you might be all in regards to your work. Like every day you are on time and every day you are committed to your work. It is very important that when it calls for you to rest, you need to take time off. The reason being, your body needs to rest. Yeah. And so I would encourage us to always, yes, be committed full time, all in. But then when it needs you to rest, please make sure you set aside time for yourself and for your family to actually get to rejuvenate and rest. So that's a word of today, and stay blessed even as you get into the holiday season. Back to you, Chief Mike.
Excellent. Thank you, Jose. We always appreciate you, especially coming to us while you're off on leave. Just a few more notes. If you get disconnected today or you don't get through all of today's training, we do have a Google Drive folder where you'll be able to get materials from today's training, and you'll be able to watch videos from any of our training that we've done so far this year. If you watch the video and answer a few questions, I'll send you a certificate of attendance for those trainings as well. So keep your eye in the chat. I'll post a link to that. You can also find all sorts of training materials and resources on our website. If you just go to africafiremission.org, under the training resources, lots of materials and things there for you as well. I think now, without further ado, I'm going to pass things over to Jason for today's presentation. Take it away, sir.
Hey, good morning. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Jose. Good to see you, Jose, as always. My name's Jason. I'm a battalion chief at a department outside of Minneapolis in Minnesota. Today, I'm going to be talking about incident command system. I'm going to bring up my slides here, Mike, and hopefully you can help me work through that. Good to go, Mike?
Excellent.
All right, awesome. I've done a handful of trainings here with AFM, and I look forward to it every time. And so please, I'll make time for questions at the end, and please ask away. So a little bit about me. I've been a battalion chief with West Metro. I have about 15 years of experience. I've been a battalion chief for the last 2. I work in the training department, so this is kind of my world. I really enjoy it. We do a lot of training for our own department. I do a lot of the training for our fellow officers, and then we have a fire academy that we do for all of our new members. Some of the stuff we're using today is what we use for all of those. I mean, this is stuff that our new members see that we get to use for our officer training and then for the department in general. So I live in Minnesota. For reference, it's about -5 Celsius here today. So we have a few different challenges than most of Kenya, from my experience there. I was lucky enough to go to Kenya in 2019, and then I was there last year too. So I see a couple familiar faces, and it's great to see. Um, Speaking of cold, last night I was in incident command of a rollover car that was on fire in the middle of a busy two-lane highway. And so talking about some of the challenges with that in the incident command structure, and pretty good timing for helping my presentation. So I did have to work with our police and our Department of Transportation folks to make sure that we were all on the same page. You can imagine putting water on the road on a busy highway during rush hour when it's probably -5 to -10 Celsius has its own challenges of we don't need any more accidents after that. So we have to treat the road and make sure we did that properly too. So I'll tie that in a little bit in this. But yeah, like I said, it's great to see many familiar faces on here, and thanks for having me. So a couple objectives. I know that from my experience there that the incident command system is used, and there's and knowing from experience in the fire service, there's many different versions of it used, and that's okay. And there's nothing that says there has to be one certain way. So hopefully you can take away some of the concepts that I'm going to be talking about today and use them for best practices within your own training within your own department. We'll talk about the organization of the incident command structure, and then kind of whatever your role is, whether the firefighter level, officer level, or chief level within the incident command structure. One thing, when we talk about how we train, how we play. So the incident command system is something that we should use in all operations, not just in operations, but in training. If we have the opportunity to practice it all the time in training, it should go very well when it matters, when we're in operations. If there's a fire, or in my example, a car fire, rollover, injury accident last night, the incident command system gives us some structure to all of those calls. This is based off of the National Incident Management System. In the United States, this came out of wildland firefighting back in the 1990s. And what they realized is that they don't have a standard way for everyone to talk to each other. And so this was created through the wildfire system, but really adapted now into the fire service as well. There are many guidelines. There's a very specific structure they have in the NIMS system, but each local department will have their own procedures, and each firefighter on that department must know that. So there's your opportunity to practice both in training and operations. Why we use it here? It gives us a single incident action plan. If we have 5 crews on scene and everyone's working on a different plan, that's not going to be very effective for us. So practicing and using one certain incident command system for your department allows for everybody to work on the same page. It gives unity of command. We'll get into that a little bit more. It will help keep the organization of the scene much better with the span of control. So we're not having one supervisor trying to supervise too many people. It clarifies what communication should be on the scene. We don't need, so everybody's talking similar and knows what we're trying to say. Designate incident locations so that we understand we're all using the same terminology, and then making sure we have adequate resources and making sure we can use those resources together well. Reality of the whole thing is that this gives us some consistency across the board, whether you're working with a different crew from your department, whether it's different people working with your crew that day, everybody should be on the same page, know what you're talking about. They say it brings calm to the chaos. I mean, if you've been to many fire scenes, they're very, very chaotic, and having a plan and having a structure to fall within can help you take that step back and get back to more of a calm scene. It says our scenes are unpredictable, but our actions should not be. We don't know what that fire is going to do every time. We can have a general guess, but we know that based on what we see, our actions can follow through based on training and based on our plan that we already have. Having an agreed upon game plan before you go, knowing who's going to be in charge, knowing who is going to be running the scene, or knowing who's going to be the crew leader, helps make that decision much faster by the time you get there. We have what we call standing orders. Again, so same thing. If you have a crew leader on that truck, you understand what that crew leader's role is, what your role is, and that helps, again, make decisions much faster when you get on scene. This is not very detailed. This is as simple as whoever's in the back might be the one who is going to grab a certain tool or grab the first line off of the truck, and that can be how we're having that consistent conversation. So we're not deciding it in the moment. This is not supposed to be overbearing. It's not supposed to be micromanaging at that level. This is supposed to help, again, in that decision making and hold everyone accountable. A few basics. We're going to talk about fireground roles. How do firefighters approach with ICS? We'll talk about fireground movement a little bit, and then a couple pros and cons of what this looks like. So the ICS system can be used for a small incident or much bigger, and then it can help us expand or contract that role as well. One of our best practices that we found, we have this fireground command worksheet, which I will put in the resources and tools. But this gives us a common picture that everyone's looking at together. So we know where the expectations are. We know that whoever's in charge can use this, and everybody knows what they're using, so they have it. So this gives us an outline for our members to use, to know what assignment they're on, know what assignment they have. When we get into incident priorities, it helps the incident commander go through those priorities and be able to check off what they have. This has been a great tool for us to know that everybody's going to be doing things in sort of the same order. So it's predictable for you as a firefighter as well. So we know that when the incident commander gets there, they are going to do size up, and so you'll get that information from them. They'll establish command and do a 360 of the building, and then update the crew as there. So the crew will know what stage the incident commander's at. This is just building some consistency, so the crews will hear the same thing in the same order and be able to most effectively help out. Like I said, I can get this uploaded with the training material as well. So working within the incident command system, everyone from top down must know and understand their role. And the more you understand your role, whether it's in training or on the fire scene, the more it helps you know what the expectations of you are. So a couple of basic components of incident command is that there's one person in command of every incident. There should be one person from your fire department, your crew, who's in charge of that incident. If you have 5 people trying to tell you what to do, that's not very effective. Each person should only have one supervisor. That supervisor may have a supervisor all the way up to the incident commander. But again, same thing. If you have 3 different supervisors trying to tell you what to do, that's not going to be very effective for messaging out to the crew members. And initially, when you get there, the company officer or whoever your crew leader is may report directly to the incident commander, and then they may establish more layers of supervisor, or at least more supervisory layers from there down. So think of it as, if you have both your mom and your dad trying to tell you how to do something completely different, and then one is getting mad at you for what you did that the other one told you, that's not very effective in your home if they don't communicate that as well. ICS works equally well at all types of incidents. We use it for training. We use it for emergencies, some non-emergency events. If we're doing a public education event and we have 8 different stations set up, it's much more effective to have one person in charge. One example I'll use is that we had a vehicle fair this summer where we had a few different vehicles set up in different locations around, and then we had a area where kids could spray the fire hose, and then we had an area where we were helping sell things with the Boy Scouts. And so if each of those crews were talking to the leader of that event, that's not going to be as effective as them talking to one leader from the fire service talking to the who can then convey all of those messages to the event leader. So if the event leader had something to get down, they could work with the leader from the fire service who can relay that information so that they are not trying to spread themselves too thin. For the emergency system, or from the emergency side, the incident command and the fire makes a lot of sense. Like, for example, I was talking about the car fire last night. We had 2 fire trucks, 3 chiefs, and many cops and an ambulance there. And again, if they're all doing their own thing and not communicating with each other through one central area, we're getting mixed messaging throughout. So me being the incident commander of that, if they convey that information to me, I can convey it out properly to who needs to know. When we talk about unity of command, that means each person only has one supervisor. Like I was talking about the example, if you have both of your parents trying to tell you, your parents aren't in the same room and you ask them to do something, or they're trying to tell you what to do, it's not going to be very effective when you're doing what mom said, but dad wanted you to do what dad said. So only having one supervisor and staying within that. If you have somebody else that asks you what to do, they should be asking you through your supervisor. All of your orders and assignments will come through that supervisor. Again, if there's another one, they should give that information to your supervisor as well. This doesn't necessarily have to be an officer at this. It might be the best qualified person should be assigned at the appropriate level, but understand with your crew that you should designate who the supervisor would be. So they're going to be the one who talks to a supervisor above them, so that we don't have 5 people from the crew all asking the same question to numerous different people. For us, we typically have lieutenants and captains run crews, and then the chief officers will run divisions, groups, and command staff roles. We don't always have to. That's not a rule that we have necessarily. That's just been our best practice based on experience level with our officers that we have. We talk about span of control. If you've been a supervisor, or I don't understand how some teachers can do it, but it talks about the max number of people that one supervisor can effectively manage. All the studies have kind of showed that the supervisors do best with between 3 to 7 people that they're supervising. Incident command system tries to limit that to 5. And so if you look at if you ever go to like a classroom and try to do fire prevention teaching in any of the classrooms, if you imagine how difficult of a job that teacher has to get 25 students to follow and all line up and do what they're supposed to. So they may have a lot more rules than what you do in the fire service. But in that, within the fire service and within supervisory, they recommend between 3 to 5, and then ICS says 5 is your most effective number for span of control. ICS should be modular. I mean, this doesn't have to be how we do it in my department. Doesn't have to be the same as how you would do it at your department. And so a lot of this could be based on what resources you have. If you only have 5 fire trucks, and the next department has 20 fire trucks, you can both use ICS, but it is going to look different. So you have to do it for what you have. It also could be depending on the scene. If we have a department fire, we may have up to 11 crews showing up with different fire trucks. But our car fire last night, we had only 2 engines. We can use ICS for both of those. It's just going to look like a bigger or smaller picture. We don't have to use every component within that. I might not need to break into separate divisions if we don't have police there helping us as well, or we don't have, or our building's not that big. We might not need a supervisor on the back side of that building, so that we don't have to use every component every time. It gives us options of how we can do it, but the terminology will still sound the same. We can always add components if we need, but we need to have familiar language, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then ICS is designed to shrink and grow with the incident. So the biggest thing we need to understand for ICS and within your department, what helps is common terms. So one of the most effective things that has ever come out of the incident command structure is common terms, so that if I say I want your crew to be fire attack crew, you know what your role is, or your crew is going to be a search crew. You know what your role is. We also use that for different points of, or different geographical points of a building. It might be the first floor is going to be our division 1, second floor would be division 2, and so on and so forth. And then when we talk about different sides of the building, we'll usually use phonetic codes. It might be the Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, or Delta side of the building, but that allows us to have common terms, and that's something that has come out of ICS. We say 10 codes. If from my experience in Kenya and teaching other parts around the world, excuse me, that you've watched enough either police shows or old fire shows. If you've ever watched emergency, they use 10 codes. They're saying 10-4, 10-7. I don't know. It was kind of a older generation thing, but they don't use 10 codes in ICS. They're no longer considered common terminology. And then common terms eliminate confusion. If I'd say I want you to go to the front of the building, that might not mean the same for every person. Or if I say I want you to go to the first floor, in some parts of the United States, the first floor is the lower level, the ground level. And in other parts of the United States, the first floor is the level above the ground level. So understanding what common terms mean for your department can help eliminate confusion as well. So when I talk about integrated communications, everybody within that chain of command or in the ICS structure should have access to similar communications and know that how you're using. For us, we use the same radio channel. We have a dispatcher who can monitor that as well. We may have a second radio channel for other things going on. Everyone within that chain has to understand what type of communication you're going to use. Are you going to be using radios? Does your department not have radios? And how is the supervisor connecting with the supervisor who supervises them? Do they need to walk down to the end of the hallway and give an update every 2 minutes? What's most effective for your department? I was talking to one of the departments when I was teaching in rural area of Minnesota here, and they don't have radios for every department, but their standard was that every 2 minutes they would give a time hack on the engine where they would blow their horn, and that would mean the supervisor would go connect with his supervisor and then pass that information up. So they weren't waiting, because they didn't have, that was their version of communicating without radios. So without a radio, that that was their standard. So just the most important thing is to understand within your system what works for communication and what tools that you have to accomplish that. We talked about incident action plans. This is one this is an overall plan that allows us to all be on the same page again. For our purpose, and for incident command system purpose, the plan supports the same thing regardless of how that plan is being used. Our plan our first priority is life safety. And that's not just life safety for the victims that we're looking for or our patients in a medical scenario. That's our life safety as well. So first and foremost, our incident plan will start to support life safety, whether that means if we can effectively keep ourselves safe and go search for victims, or how does that keep us safe if we're on a roadway? For example, last night, one of our first my thought process for life safety was to make sure no one was left in that vehicle that was on fire, and then make sure that if anyone was out there receiving medical treatment. Those are the two priorities that we can make a difference on immediately. After that, we're on a busy highway, so understanding life safety for my crew is how to shut that highway down, how to get that blocked, or how to effectively manage traffic so that my crew who's doing firefighting operations can remain safe and remove that hazard of vehicles and that. Next priority is incident stabilization. As soon as we can establish that our members are going to be safe and that we can make any choices about rescuing victims or treating victims as well, let's stabilize that incident, put the fire out, remove any hazards. So that's what I'm talking about with incident stabilization. Once we get that, then we're going to talk about property and environmental conservation. If we're in a home and we can put the fire out, but now we have water draining down or filling up a basement or something like that, and we want to save their property, that's our next step in that. So we still need to put the fire out to preserve that, but then what are the next step once that incident is stabilized? We consider incident stabilized once the fire is out, once the main person who's injured or sick is being treated, and then from there we can make the other considerations. How do we save people's property, or how do we make that scene better for the environment? Whether it's if we're using water and foam, and we don't want that to go down drain nearby, can we block off that drain? So those are some of the considerations. These are things that can be communicated up through the incident commander or down from the incident commander as well, both on large and small incidents. As that incident grows and you have more command staff, this is things that they need to be thinking about too, but the incident commander is going to be driving and creating this plan, but everybody that works within the plan knows that the goals work in that order as well. This will get much bigger in some of the larger incidents when you have other agencies coming in. For example, for us, if we have a gas leak at a gas station, our job might be make sure that no one's there and that this can't start on fire, right? Incident stabilization might be to shut that gas off and make sure that there's no more coming out. And then property and environmental conservation will be make sure that gas doesn't go down the drain. After that, we're going to work with other agencies, maybe the cops, to shut down the road so that the cars aren't moving the gas further with, running over gas and doing that. And then working with companies that are going to come and clean it up as well. So that's what we're talking about with our priorities and incident action plan. ICS organization, it has, like I said, we have common terminology that we use, and this can be expanded or contracted as much as we need. Typically, in our world, in a regular fire scene, we may only use incident command, and then we work in operations. We'll usually have a safety officer as well if we have enough people, and that's an important role that we have as well. But if it does get much bigger, I think when I was in Kenya in 2022, there was a building collapse while we were there, and that's going to be a multi-day, multi-crew type of incident. So there's going to be other sections as well. So that might be where we talk about having a planning section. So if I say planning section to one of my other chiefs, they know that they're going to be planning for the next they know they're going to be planning for the next operational period. And me using the term planning section, that's common terminology where they know what, if I assign somebody in that, they'll know what my expectations are. Similar to logistics, if I say they're part of the logistics section, they know that they're going to be working on getting more, if anybody needs more stuff or if stuff is breaking, they can work with the logistics section to get that established. And the logistics, whatever chief is assigned to that section understands what that role is based on our common terminology and practicing how this goes. The only position that actually has to be filled at everyone, like I said, this can be as big or small as needed, is the incident command role. There has to be somebody in charge of every scene, whether it's we run some medical calls with our department. If somebody calls and says that they're sick and we have a crew going there, somebody still needs to be in charge of that crew. We might not formally establish an incident commander in that way, but it's the person who's going to be making sure that the scene is safe, making sure that the crew members are going to be safe going into that home to the sick patient, and that too. But then you get to a fire, well, that incident commander is going to be the one who's working with all the other organizations. So like I said, it can be as big or small as needed, and it allows for common terminology in all of those scenes. So the incident commander is ultimately responsible for managing the incident. They're in charge of the entire thing. So whatever happens below that, that is their responsibility as well. But that's why we have common terminology and having an understanding of how the system works prior to getting there. Command is usually established when the first unit arrives on scene, and it maintains until the last unit leaves. Last night at that car fire, I was the first fire officer on scene, and I had all of the crews and other chiefs come through while I was there. And as I left, there was still one of the cops there, and so I turned over command to them, and they would remain in that position until everyone leaves the scene. We talked about the incident action plan. The incident commander is going to make those initial decisions. We talked about defining what those positions are with life safety, incident stabilization, and property conservation. So they'll establish what that looks like initially. That may change throughout. That's one thing that ICS gives you the opportunity to do. And then they'll manage all requests and incident resources. They might not be the ones doing the work, but that's who you're going to request your stuff through, whether your supervisor is making that request upwards, and then they can work downwards through that. We don't need our supervisors talking to other people without the incident command knowing what's going on. A few things the incident commander does and doesn't do. The incident commander holds overall responsibility. Their job is to bring a calm presence. The last thing that we want is an incident commander running around yelling at everybody, and that's not very effective for what we do. They're going to implement and come up with the initial incident action plan and tactics. And they'll manage the initial resources until that incident gets bigger, and then they can assign other supervisors from there. They're going to establish what the communications are going to look like on that fire scene, and their job is to listen and oversee it to make sure that that is effective. A few things they don't do is that the incident commander should not be telling the firefighter who's on the nozzle how to be putting the fire out. They should be telling the crew that my goal or my request is for you to go put that fire out. And however they do it, they'll let the crew do that. The incident commander does not try to do every position. Like I said, when we talked about span of control, having only 5 people within your span of control does not work if you're trying to be the crew leader and incident commander and pump operator and traffic control and everything else. We talk about unified command. So that's when we have agencies that overlap. Again, going back to my example last night with the car rollover and car fire, we had agencies including police, transportation, or the road crews, ambulance, and then fire. So I can't tell the police how to do their job as incident commander, but I can work with who their incident commander is as well. I was in charge of the fire portion of it, and the cops may be in charge of the cop portion of it, and then ambulance and so on and so forth. So it's an opportunity. I was in charge of the scene overall in this case, but in some cases, if that was bigger, we might have a representative from each at the incident command post and making that decision. So we can talk to each other so we know what's going on as well. This usually happens when we have much bigger incidents. Again, going back to building collapse is an example. That's going to take many different agencies there, and they may have one supervisor or one commander for each of those agencies in all kind of in the same place so they can talk to one another. Talked about command staff a little bit earlier. We typically will fill a safety officer position. An example I could use for a liaison officer is that or a public information officer, both an apartment fire would be a good example of how we would use that. The liaison officer would be the one who works with the building management, with the members of the or the residents of that building, so they can understand where they're going, how to come up with a plan going forward for them. That's not something as incident commander when I'm trying to have fire crews work, search, put out fire, and do whatever else. I can't be working with all of the residents at the same time, so I might assign a liaison officer. Public information officer is used for us on bigger incidents as well. They'll report directly to the incident commander so they can get all of the information that they need properly and effectively out. That might be, we have, again, in this case, it might be a building, let's say a building collapse. We're going to have a public information officer who can talk to the community, talk to the media, talk to the politicians who all show up to make sure to see what's going on, to get that information out properly. But coming only from one person makes that information more consistent. When you have a public information officer, their job is to do just that. We don't need them trying to do firefighting operations and that, but they can get information from the incident commander. They're not going to be working at the fire ground level. They'll be staying at the level with the incident commander. Okay, so we put a safety officer in place at every larger incident. Their job is to not get too far into the scene, but a big picture for safety. And the incident commander relies on them to make sure everyone is safe. I talked briefly earlier about the different section chiefs and what they do. Most oftentimes in the fire service, we're going to be living in just at the operations level, unless we're getting into fires that are going to be needing another incident commander or more crews. We may get into planning and logistics going forward, and then finance as well if we have to start looking for how to pay for more resources outside of what we have. But typical fire scene, if we go to a car fire, we're not getting into planning next operational period. We don't necessarily need someone dedicated to be in charge of logistics. We're going to put the fire out in operations. The incident commander may be able to contact whoever they need for a towing company or road debris or something like that. If they need to get bigger, they may put somebody in charge of logistics in that case. But it gives us more, it spreads out the amount of work that the incident commander would have to do, so they're not trying to do it all by themselves. Set operations, this is what we're doing most of the time: fire suppression, rescue, medical emergency services, and then it's conducted with importance to the IAP. Actions that are directly related to controlling the incident: put out the fire, help the patient who's sick or injured, and maybe look for victims. Planning, like I said, they're going to be collecting and disseminating all the information for this event, especially planning for the next section or the next part of the event going forward. They might be, if the incident action plan is going to be updated or continued on from what the incident commander may be doing, they may designate somebody to work on that as well. That might be the planning section chief. talked about logistics earlier, but they're the ones who, if we are going to need more resources or supplies outside of what we have, we can assign somebody to work on getting that stuff. For example, if I know that we have a multi-unit apartment fire that's going to keep going, and I need more crews, and I need temporary housing for members or meals for our firefighters, so that I might assign somebody for logistics. And that if that's going to take too much time for me as the incident commander. And then finance administration, if we have to, we're going to go buy food for our firefighters, or we need to pay for temporary shelter for residents or our folks, we may have someone who's in charge of working with the finance departments in that. It might be something that the incident commander does not have the resources and time for within the incident. So a few roles within the operations and incident command. We have the incident commander. We use an on-deck system, so we have one person in charge of accountability outside of our incident commander. Again, if the incident commander was trying to keep track of where every single person was on scene, it's not as effective, so they can have somebody to help them in that case. So we can expand that out to have somebody who's taking care of accountability, or we call it DAC in that case. We typically have a safety officer. If we have enough people, we'll have an aide for our incident commander. They'll have somebody there to help take notes, help work on the radio if there's multiple conversations going on, and then help listen for the incident commander too. If it's a large enough incident, we'll have a public information officer, and then RIT team, where our rapid intervention team or rapid intervention crew we may have heard of, the crew that's there to make any rescues for our own firefighters if needed, and then a liaison for, like I talked about earlier, with building staff, with other agencies or however we need. We talked a little bit about general staff already. Then working downwards, we're getting into our group supervisor. So we have a group whose only role is to go and do search and rescue, but there's 4 crews doing search and rescue. I might put a group supervisor for that, for all the search and rescue group. Then we'll have our company officer, or crew leader at that level, and then our company. So in our case, we have a couple different apparatus there but each apparatus would have their own crew leader as well. So a couple things as the company officer role within the incident command is to know that your crew has the right level of PPE. That's your responsibility, is to understand that they have the right level of PPE for the assignment that they're doing. Make sure your crew knows the assignment. Make sure they have the right tools before they get up to that scene. So some of it's going to be knowledge as a crew leader of what tools you may be needing and what you're getting into. Your crew leader would be in charge of crew accountability, placing the initial apparatus. So if you're the first on scene, how do you place that effectively? And the crew leader should play a large part in that, of how to place that so you can most effectively make a difference on that scene. Crew leader's in charge of crew safety, and then keeping an eye on a bigger picture. They need to know what's going on within the scene and how they fit in, so that they can stay safe and understand that they're working within the structure still. I talked about common terminology and local designators for us. I'll use the example of how we do this. For us, this is a 4-story apartment building. We call it, in Minnesota, we use the term, the ground level here would be level 1 or division 1, division 2, division 3, division 4. If we have a basement in here, or a parking garage, it might be the basement division, but that's how our common terminology is. And you don't have to use the same as we do, but your department all needs to be consistent in how they do it. So if I tell somebody to go to the 3rd floor in some of the southern states in the United States, they're going to go to the top floor in this building, because they would call it ground level, 1st level, 2nd, and 3rd. So for us, our common terminology is 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th here, but we need to understand that as our organization. When we talk about exposures, we'll say, or sides, same thing. We do ours phonetically. So our address side of a building, wherever the address is posted, we call that our alpha side. And then going clockwise, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. That's common terminology for us. So if I say I need a crew to go to the Bravo side, they know what I'm talking about. Divisions or groups. We talk about divisions as, like I said, if I say I want the supervisor, somebody to supervise all the crews on the first floor, there would be my Division 1 supervisor. And a counter to that is if I say I want one person in charge of everybody doing ventilation on the scene, they're going to be my ventilation group supervisor. So for us, divisions are geographical and groups are functional. Within ICS, we have, like I said, we can expand or contract this as much as we need. If we have, this is a good example of a smaller scale incident, is that we only have 3 apparatus on scene. I don't need to get much bigger than incident command can talk to the supervisor of each of those. The incident command in this case only has 3 people that report to them. So integrating into here, we have we may expand this out a little bit more. Like I said, is that we may have divisions and groups working together. So I might have 2 crews. In this case, it looks like I have 2 crews working in the ventilation group on the first floor. And then the first floor also has rescue going on. That division supervisor can supervise both of those groups because they're in charge of that overall scene for that first floor. Same with the second floor in this case. Again, using common terms and common terminology for us allows us to understand what that supervisor, what that crew is even doing at that level. Accountability, I talked about our deck officer. You could call it an accountability officer, or however you want to call it. We use a board that has all of that we can write on. We can put our accountability tags on. And that, again, is common for whoever shows up as that officer. They have the same board in every vehicle, the same looking accountability tags, and that, so whoever's in that role, or we could switch people within that role and they know what that is supposed to be, what that's supposed to look like. That helps establish fireground flow and helps for safety. Also, what we use as power checks is if we need to go through everyone on scene I think ours are every 10 minutes and make sure everyone is safe and that they have accountability. This allows that accountability officer to know who they're looking for. With the communications, a few things that come up, incident. So the incident commander should give a size up. That's painting a picture for the rest of the people coming on scene. The biggest thing to point out on this slide is to make sure that you understand what the expectation is for communications. If I'm the incident commander and I'm giving you an order over the radio, are you repeating that back to me, or are you letting me know that you copy? How do you understand that so I know that you got that information? Expanding ICS, though, really allows that we reduce radio communication. So I'm only talking to 1 person and not 5 people. So a little bit to summarize kind of what we looked at today, the biggest thing with incident command structure is that it provides a standard and very professional approach to managing incidents. My incidents, I know, should all look very similar, whether they're a single vehicle accident or an apartment fire. I'm using the same terminology at all of those, and then I'm using the same terminology in training so that my firefighters know what to expect and know how to communicate within that. They know that if I give them an assignment, they know what expectations are based on the common terminology we're using. As you implement incident command system, or as you practice it, it should be used the same in training as it is in operations. Exercises should run using incident command. Terminology should be the same whether it's a public education event or a fire. And that allows your firefighters to be more successful in how they communicate with you as well, and they know what your expectations are. And then every incident, the incident commander should be going through that checklist in their head, and may not be doing some of the stuff on the checklist based on the incident, but it helps understand and standardize that entire incident for folks. In a smaller incidents, we may be able to only use a handful of portions of ICS, and that works great. That gives us the same success or same level of success at those incidents. The incident commander, however, is overall responsible for every incident, and then all the way down to firefighters, they need to understand ICS and what their role is within it. So Mike, I do have some time for questions as well here. That works.
Excellent. We've got a question in the chat about, what are the 7 principles of the incident command system? And that one's tough to answer, right? Because there's, everybody sort of presents and works with that individually. And to boil it down, I know there's some places that come up with a list, but go ahead and give your thoughts there, Jason. I wouldn't restrict it to a number,
Yeah, there's probably a book answer for what the 7 principles are. We know what incident command system works for our department, and we work within that. I don't know that I don't have the book answer for that one right now, Mike.
Yeah, I'm with you, but as I think about that, you really covered in your wrap up there what the main principles are, and the common terminology, the interoperability, the manageable span of control, standard terms, objectives and plans, so sometimes we tend to overthink some of the stuff. And that's what I really loved about your presentation, is that emphasizing, this is how we do it. You make it work the way that it'll work for your brigade, right? And also, one of the things I think maybe you'd agree with this, Jason, is when we do some of this ICS training here in the US, when somebody comes back fresh from an ICS training, they want to come to the next incident and fill all those positions, right? And there's so many levels. We have, there's 4 different levels of ICS training. We've got 100, 200, 300, 400. There's actually 700 and 800, but they're kind of lower than 100. But, that ICS 400 that we teach sometimes, right? That's for these major incidents that cover, here in the US, multiple states, right? These are sort of like once in a lifetime incidents. And you can't take that command structure for a once in a lifetime major incident and try to apply that at your simple vehicle accident like you were on last night. So that was what I really enjoyed about your presentation, was how you really related well how to keep the incident command system simple. And if you just need an incident commander, that's great, and expand from there.
I like to think of it as, if we have 100 tools that we can use in the incident command system for those incidents that might be a once in a lifetime incident, we might not need all of those at a regular everyday car accident. We might only need 3 of those, but that gives us all of those tools that we can shrink down and use that. But now everybody is working in the same toolbox, I guess.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times we fill some of those positions without naming them that,
Right.
Water's is a difficult situation that we encounter a lot in Africa, right? Having access to that water. And sometimes you call someone that's got to bring a private company to bring like a water bowser to you, right? Well, whoever called, whoever arranged for that to come over, that was your logistics officer, right? And you may not have called them that, right? And they may not be a command level, a chief or a line officer, but whoever does that. So a lot of times, we're filling these positions, people are acting in these positions without the formal names and without the formal titles and that sort of stuff too.
I wanted to point out in there from that too, is that some of that comes with practice and using, as you use this in training and you use it in every incident, you start to understand what roles are. And that might just be that terminology of like, I need you to go, and I don't need to assign somebody necessarily to say, you're my logistics officer. I might say, hey, I need you to be in charge of water. And on the understanding of that, and like I said, it's modular for every department and what works best for you. But this is a great outline that you can use and base it off of, and then understand what works best for your brigade or your department as you go forward.
Yeah. Yep. We've got a question that popped up that falls right into this. Do you think ICS principles can be used the same way everywhere, regardless of team sizes and environment?
I think from the principal side and from the terminology side, absolutely. I think we could take and use the same training at any fire brigade, and then they can implement it what works best for them. My department has 3 stations. It has 7 major apparatus, a whole bunch of smaller apparatus. If I go to Minneapolis, which has 27 stations, probably closer to 90 apparatus, they're going to be using the same principles. They're going to be using it on a different scale. And it should sound and look the same for every department or every station on their department as it does the same stations at mine. We might not be exactly the same. We may have different standard operating guidelines or procedures within our departments, but we've implemented a structure, and that's what the incident command system is a structure that their department works with. And so there's nothing that says it has to be the same for every department, but it provides sort of an outline that has been used for best success.
Yeah. That incident can be anything, right? That incident can be your Christmas party that you're planning, right? You can use the incident command system as a businessman. You can use it to prepare for anything. Here we dress somebody up like Santa Claus and put them on the fire truck and drive them around the neighborhood and visit the kids, right? We can use the incident command system to drive Santa Claus around on the fire truck, right? So absolutely, you can, once you've got that concept down, you can manage that in all parts of your life.
Well, I think we absolutely do use it something similar all the time, and we're just formalizing a way to use it in a common terminology. So if we have somebody planning your Christmas party at work, and that person's your incident commander, they're going to assign roles and tasks from there. If they use the same roles and tasks every year, it would probably be easier, but they don't. And then the next person might not use it the same. So if they have a guideline or a structure to use, it just provides a more consistent thing. So you're going to have your Christmas party might be the same every year, but you do have those roles already defined. So you're not reinventing every time you do it. So.
Excellent. At this point in time, we're going to wrap up sort of the formal portion of our class. I want to take the time to thank Jason for coming out and sharing his knowledge and his practical experience with us. And I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your schedules, for spending your money to be here, to use your bundles, to come and join us today. We appreciate what you do to help serve your community and better yourselves. So at this point in time, we're going to wrap it up. We've got one last training session yet for this year next week. So be sure to join us again, and we'll see you all then. Thanks, everyone.